In this video, we're going to talk about time-based musical organization, which is all about how we structure sound in time. So, before we go on, we need to ask ourselves, where does music actually exist? To answer that, we have to work out, what is music made of? So, actually, we know that music is made out of sound waves. Okay, what are some implications of this? Well, sound waves have to travel in space through a medium. What does that imply? That means that sound exists in time. So time has to pass for that to exist. Now, can we experience time on a whole? For example, if we look at a painting, it's all there. If we look at a sculpture, it's all there. We can see all of it. So music exists in time. Because of this, it has a distinct beginning and a distinct end. So as listeners, we can only hear from moment to moment. In order to make sense of it, what do we need to do? Well, we need to rely on our memory. Our memory enables us to say, hey, I've heard this thing before, or hey, this is new and different. It's a different bit. So in order to work out what's going on, we rely on memory to make some sort of form. It does this by recognizing what it's heard and realizing that it hasn't heard this other bit. So things exist, then they recur, we can tell. In order to start talking about this as composers of music, what we need to do is review some of the things that we've learned about in music theory, but not as a person trying to play music, but as a person trying to organize sound to create new music. Now, the most obvious thing is music exists on top of some underlying pulse. So let me get my metronome. There's trusty old metronome. Here is a pulse. The pulse is used to synchronize the different layers of music. Humans instinctively recognize this pulse. Okay, that's enough of that. As you know, we human people have been detecting pulses all of our lives. When we hear our heartbeat, a pulse. When we hear footsteps, a pulse. I just demonstrated a very stylized piece of language with a pulse. We also have longer pulses like the day and night cycle, the lunar cycle, the annual cycle. So, once we've got a pulse, the other thing is it goes at a particular speed. The annual cycle of years is very slow. Footsteps can be quite fast, especially if you're running. So the speed of the pulse is called tempo, which is time in Italian. I'm going to play this pulse. If I was to count with my watch, I'd be able to count 80 pulses in a minute. And we call that 80 beats per minute. Now, this tempo, or speed of the pulse, has a large impact on the emotional effect of the music. I'm going to play some basic chords. Very slow, but sad. Do the same thing faster. Same notes, different speed, different emotional impact. So normally, for most styles of music, most of the time the tempo doesn't change, but it can be varied for dramatic effect. If I speed it up, it gets increasing agitation, but I could slow it down and finish. Slowing down creates a sense of completion. So, we often talk about tempo, we often talk about rhythm, but what is rhythm? Well, that is something that many people are confused about. The important thing about rhythm is that the way that notes are distributed in time on top of our underlying pulse. By the way, we often call pulses beats. So rhythm is putting actual sounds on top of the pulse. So many types of music, we use short repeated rhythm patterns, and we use these to create a sense of structure or form in the music. These, along with meter, become basic building blocks for building musical structure. So, let us play some rhythm patterns. Here's my metronome. I'm going to hit the table. Okay, if I play one note per pulse, that's a very common rhythm pattern. If I do that, each of those notes is called a quarter note or a crotchet. I can play one note every 2 pulses, for example. Okay, I could do them long and short. Okay, your camera is shaking. Okay, good. So all of those, the pulses were at a particular rate and the notes on top of them were longer. I'll do one shorter. I'll clap it. So every pulse, I clap 2 notes. I could do it. Oh, by the way, those are called quavers or 8th notes. I could also do it 3 notes per pulse. Like that. So, you'll notice that in the metronome, we have one note sounding different from the others. It has an accent. Accent 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Emphasis 2, 3, 4. So by putting an emphasis on the pulse, we demarcate blocks of time, which we then can put rhythm patterns in, and these short blocks of time become the basis of building larger time structures. So normally when we do this in pop music, we have groups of 4 pulses put together as a block. And because there is 4 of them and they're normally quarter notes, we have a time signature called 4/4. So we can have subdivisions of 2 or subdivisions of 3, as I just showed before. So when I have a subdivision of 2, it's a simple meter. But if I do a subdivision of 3, it's called a compound meter. So, pulse divided into 2 is a simple meter. Pulse divided into 3 is a compound meter. each of these has quite a different feel. So, as I've just said, rhythm patterns can help us create structure. They do that by building small Lego blocks of notes. And how do us human people make sense of them? Well, we need to have it in our memory to know if a rhythm pattern has recurred. Has this recurred before? Yes, it has. Has this recurred before? No, it hasn't. So we can tell and build a structure by recognizing things that have occurred earlier. To a large degree, musical structure is articulated by using rhythm patterns on top of a pulse. To a large degree, music gets a lot of its coherence because of repeated rhythmic patterns on top of the pulse. Depending on how fast the pulse is going and how we put notes on top of that pulse, we can change the emotional intensity. So this becomes a primary tool for us as composers when we create music.